So let's keep it rolling and let's continue the NFL draft recaps and shift over to the NFC East. And I think this is probably mostly going to be a Dave Gettleman New York Football Giants bash session. Well, at least a sizable portion of it. So it feels right, doesn't it? Sounds about right, doesn't it? What? I still, even a few months later, can't wrap my fingers around what exactly the hell the plan or the strategy is here. Now, sometimes you could have a team, to me, that has picks I don't always agree with, but at least I see a strategy. At least I see a vision. I see a certain approach. And I see none of that with the New York Football Giants and what they did in this 2019 draft. This even goes back to 2018. There's always going to be that question of taking Saquon Barkley over Sam Darnold. Was that the right decision? Should the Giants have went for the better overall player versus the guy that could end up being a franchise quarterback? And especially when you look at the optics of what happens if Sam Darnold does become the franchise quarterback and he's playing in the same stadium as your team, but he's playing in the AFC for the Jets. Long term, that could look really, really bad. Like, in theory, let's just say for a second that Sam Darnold ends up becoming that level of dude. And I'm not saying he's going to, because he has flaws in his game, some notable, sizable flaws. But let's say he does become that dude. And let's say someday he becomes a franchise or elite quarterback in the National Football League. You literally could have Saquon Barkley have a great 8 to 10 year NFL career. And by the time he gets inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Sam Darnold could still be the quarterback of the New York Football Jets. So it was risky nonetheless. But when I look at this draft, here's what I don't understand about it from the Giants' standpoint. You're in a win-now mode, but Eli Manning is your quarterback. That, to me, is not logical. If you're wanting to win now, Eli should not be your guy. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So you're in win-now mode, which is why you drafted Saquon Barkley last year. But then in this offseason, you trade away by far your best, most impactful offensive weapon in Odell Beckham Jr. to get a first and third round pick. So you're in win-now mode with a crappy, washed-ass quarterback in Eli Manning that you're going to pay too much money for in 2019. Which means that you're forsaking, in theory, some of the future to try and win now. But then, a year after passing on Sam Darnold in order to draft Saquon Barkley, you turn around and you trade away Odell Beckham Jr. That's just hard to reconcile. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And you could say sometimes, is addition by subtraction? But is that really going to apply in Odell Beckham Jr.'s case? Like, you look at the Giants and the receiving core right now and what they've got. What do they have? Golden Tate's going to be suspended, the first 4 games of the year for a PED bust. Sterling Shepard, he's your next dude. They just paid him, but he's got some injuries right now as I speak. I'm sure he'll be healthy at some point to start the season. But, come on now. For the first few games of the season, Sterling Shepard's going to be your top dude. And then Evan Engram, a former first-round pick in 2017, has shown some flashes. But is he going to be able to put it all together? Is he going to be able to stay healthy and stay on the damn field? So at a moment in time where you're clearly pointing to trying to be in win-now mode, you sit there and trade away your best offensive weapon. And then to foul that up, you didn't take the quarterback last year, so you take a clearly inferior prospect this year in Daniel Jones from Duke, and you take him at number 6. Just because he played under Cutcliffe doesn't automatically mean he's going to be a stud. Like, this is just mind-numbing to me. Just mind-numbing, especially because of the fact you have now staked your future to Daniel Jones. Fact. You've taken him number 6 overall. Fact. You believe something in him. You envision something out of him. As a result, I would think then, because it could help Eli Manning, now your washed-ass over-the-hill quarterback, and help your young guy long-term, that your approach and philosophy in the rest of the draft would be centered around building up the offense. You did just trade away Odell Beckham Jr., so why the hell are you waiting to the 5th round to take a wide receiver? After you take Daniel Jones, The other 2 first-round picks you had, including trading back up into the tail end of round 1, were on the defensive side of the ball. Your 3rd-round pick was a defensive player. Your 4th-round pick was a defensive player. Your first 5th-round pick was a defensive player. What the hell are you doing? And you can say, well, balancing out the team and improving the defense can help the quarterback. There is something to be said about that. But there's also something to be said about Dave Gettleman doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. Like, could you imagine sitting there, reaching for Daniel Jones at number 6, and then at pick 17, the pick you got from the Browns in the Odell Beckham Jr. trade, you sat there and basically traded away Odell Beckham Jr. for a younger version of Snacks Harrison, who you traded away during this past season for a mid-late round pick. Dexter Lawrence is a very good player. Dexter Lawrence has some dude factor to him. In no way, shape, or form would I ever trade Odell Beckham Jr. for fucking Dexter Lawrence, and that's basically what happened here. Out of the 3 first-round picks, DeAndre Baker's probably the best one, but again, another defensive guy. Where the hell is the help on the offensive side of the ball? I like Darius Slayton, the wide receiver from Auburn, in round 5, and I think there's some potential there that he can play above his draft position, but overall, you're in win-now mode, but you have Eli Manning as your quarterback, which to me clearly indicates you're not in win-now mode. You have taken a young quarterback, number 6 overall, this year, massively reaching for one, instead of taking the guy that was sitting there for you at number 2 last year, who was, by all estimation, a much better prospect. All the while, by saying you are in win-now mode, you trade away your best offensive weapon. Makes 0 sense to me. If I could give the Giants an F, I would, and guess what? I can, so I will. Moving on, the Dallas Cowboys have to factor in the first-round pick in this draft was given up to get Amari Cooper, which that deal clearly, at least in the short term, worked out for the Dallas Cowboys. And it's just a reminder, even for me, like, I've never been the biggest Cooper guy. I still feel like he's a glorified number 2. But that said, sometimes guys get into situations and a change of scenery and a change of usage can change everything. So right now, that deal looks really good for the Cowboys. In terms of the rest of their draft, Tristan Hill has a bit of red ass to him. Is he going to be able to get along well? He's got some potential on the interior of the defensive line. 3rd-round pick Connor McGovern could be a future starter inside a guard. Worst case scenario, he provides you some depth. He adds strength to his strength. Tony Pollard might be a guy your round 4 pick, a running back from Memphis, is a guy that could potentially sit there and spell somebody like Ezekiel Elliott some. I really like to pick a Joe Jackson in round 5. I thought he was a little undervalued and a little underrated in this draft process, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's a guy that down the road could make a little bit of an impact. An okay draft, like a C+, B- type of thing because of factoring in the Amari Cooper deal. Now, when you look at the Eagles, they didn't have a ton of picks, but I really like what they did with the first 3 in particular. Andre Dillard, the offensive tackle from Washington State. Long-term, you got to figure he's going to be bookending with Lane Johnson. It means Dillard long-term probably plays left tackle. Lane Johnson plays right tackle where he might be better suited anyways. But when you're looking at Carson Wentz coming off of some injury problems over the past few years, you've now invested big money into him. It makes sense to invest in a bookend tackle for Lane Johnson, especially with Jason Peters at the end of his career, coming off of some previous injuries as well. Round 2, Miles Sanders, the running back from Penn State. One thing that the Eagles could really use is a more dynamic back out of their backfield, and Miles Sanders could potentially be that. He's Saquon Barkley-light. Sometimes he tries to do too many Saquon Barkley-like things without having that juice, that extra step, that extra gear that Saquon has. But Sanders should be a productive 3-down type of back for him, and I like the Arcega-Whiteside pick, the wide receiver from Stanford, the type of guy who knows how much he might contribute right away, but long-term, you're adding strength to a strength, and you're keeping that strength a strength potentially for the long term with that Eagles receiving core. But the biggest winners to me in this division in terms of the draft, they were the Washington Redskins. There was all that talk before the draft that Bruce Allen and Daniel Snyder had taken over the draft room for the Washington Redskins, which a lot of people thought meant that they were going to go trade up into the top 5 to go get Dwayne Haskins. They didn't. They stayed put, and they got Dwayne Haskins at 15. I love that thought. When I look at the way this played out in terms of the Cardinals taking Kyler Murray at number 1 and then Dwayne Haskins, who I really didn't see much daylight between the two of them overall as prospects, the Redskins are able to sit there and get him to fall to them at 15. I thought that was really good value and it was really good work. And then trading back up into the tail end of round 1 to get Montez Sweat, the explosive edge rusher from Mississippi State. Now you got a guy they could pair outside with Ryan Kerrigan. That Redskins defense is going to need to be good this year if they have any chance, and adding Sweat gives them another element, gives them another dimension, and that Redskins defense is a little slept on and a little underrated, and he most certainly could contribute. And I look at some of the other mid-round picks, specifically Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver from Ohio State, similar to a Michael Thomas in the sense of he could outplay his draft position a little bit. I don't think he has Michael Thomas's upside, obviously, but I think he's a guy, got some speed, some size, decent route runner. He's a guy that I think could play better in the pros than he did at college, especially coming out of Urban Meyer's offensive system at Ohio State, where they're not always the best in terms of how they utilize their wide receivers. And then Bryce Love from Stanford. You're talking about a Redskins team that's going to probably bring back Adrian Peterson as a feature back, have Darius Geis coming back off of his knee injury. Now, this is Bryce Love, a guy that if he would have declared last year like the hell he should have, would have at worst case been a second-round pick. Now coming off of the injury-riddled 2018 season, where he wasn't the same, wasn't nearly as effective. You get him in round 4, and those are the type of guys you want to gamble on in round 4. Guys that have questions here and questions there, but were incredibly productive college players. A lot of times those guys find a way to ultimately outplay their draft position. And if you can get the Bryce Love that you drafted to reflect a little more like the Bryce Love that you saw at Stanford in 2017, the Redskins could have ended up with a really big steal here, a really, really big steal. But the fact that they were able to get Haskins and get him at 15, whereas I saw the Cardinals take Kyler Murray at number 1, and I didn't see much daylight, I thought was a win for the Redskins. Montez Sweat, I thought was a win for them in round number 1. And then some of the other guys, like even if you talk about Martin and Pierceberger, some of the interior linemen, a team that's had trouble keeping offensive linemen healthy. They needed more talent and more depth on that offensive line. They got it. And frickin' A, Calvin Harmon, of all damn people, went in the 6th round. How the hell does that happen? I thought he was overrated in terms of people projecting him as a first-round pick, but 6th round? You got to be kidding me. And for a team in the Redskins that lacks talent, just face it, in the wide receiving core, to be able to get Calvin Harmon in the 6th round, there's a chance he could potentially even contribute as a damn rookie. I look at quality of talent and depth of talent on all 3 days of the draft, and I thought the Redskins deserve an A or an A- for what they did, and they were, to me, the winners of the division in the 2019 NFL Draft. It almost feels funny to even say that. You almost have to give Bruce Allen and Daniel Snyder credit. Good Lord.